Okay, so you guys sent in some articles about this President-elect Trump suing ABC News and George Stephanopoulos
Oh, well.
for defamation, and
Hey.
the one from Fox News
Right.
was really eye-catching. So
Yeah.
that's what we're gonna deep dive into today. It's a real legal showdown.
Yeah.
So basically, this lawsuit stems from some comments that Stephanopoulos made on This Week
Yeah.
back in March, where he incorrectly stated multiple times that Trump was found liable for rape. And I know, you're interested in the media and politics, and this case really highlights how these two worlds can collide
Absolutely.
in a big way.
Yeah.
So expert speaker, can you help us kind of unpack this?
Yeah.
What are the legal intricacies at play here?
Well, I think, at the heart of this is really defamation law, which is notoriously tricky. And, for Trump to win this case, he's going to have a really hefty burden of proof. He needs to convince the court that not only were the statements false, but that they actually harmed his reputation, and that Stephanopoulos made them either negligently or with malice.
Okay, so let's break that down a little bit. We know that the jury in the previous case found Trump liable for sexual abuse, not rape.
Right.
And those are distinct legal terms, especially in New York.
Yes.
But Stephanopoulos repeated this incorrect rape statement 10 times during the interview.
10 times.
How does that
Yeah.
How does that repetition play into the legal strategy here?
Well, I think that's a key point. The court will be looking very closely at whether those repeated misstatements were simply a mistake,
Yeah.
made in the heat of the moment, or if
Yeah.
they suggest a deliberate attempt to smear Trump's reputation.
The timing of this deposition order is interesting too. It came just days after Trump's election victory and before the holiday season. What do you make of that? What's the strategy there?
It's a fascinating chess move, that's for sure. ABC and Stephanopoulos may be aiming for a speedy deposition to try to push for a summary judgment and avoid a drawn-out trial. On the other hand, Trump as president-elect could have more leverage now to set the pace.
Right. The back and forth between the lawyers is pretty revealing too. ABC's lawyer offered to fly to Mar-a-Lago and limit the deposition to just 4 hours, maybe even on a Saturday. Wow. I mean, that almost seems overly accommodating.
It does raise an eyebrow.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
Ugh.
But then you have Trump's lawyer pointing out the logistical hurdles of working around the Secret Service, which adds another layer of complexity.
This seems to touch on this bigger conversation we keep having about the role of the media in politics, right?
Absolutely. I mean, this case has the potential to really reshape how we think about journalistic accuracy, especially in the context of these high-stakes political campaigns. And I think it raises the question, how do we ensure responsible reporting while still allowing for a robust debate and scrutiny of public figures?
And it gets even more complicated when you consider the legal weight of unintentional errors. Is it possible to damage someone's reputation even if you didn't mean to?
Yeah, that's the crux of defamation law. The court will have to decide if the potential harm caused by those statements outweighs the protection that journalists have under the First Amendment. It's a delicate balance.
And let's not forget, this whole thing is just the pre-trial phase. The actual trial isn't until June 2025. So we're in for the long haul on this one. To kind of get a better sense of the historical context, are there any landmark cases involving defamation of public figures that might give some insight into how the judge might approach this case?
Yeah, I mean, you're thinking along the right lines. There's the famous case of New York Times Covey Sullivan, which set a really high bar for proving defamation when it comes to public figures. The court ruled that to win a public figure must prove actual malice, meaning the statement was made with knowledge of its falsity or with reckless disregard for the truth. So this case could definitely come into play here.
So knowing that precedent, could a single misstatement, even one repeated multiple times, really be considered defamatory if it was made in the context of a heated political debate?
That's the million-dollar question. The court will have to really unpack the context of that This Week interview and consider whether Stephanopoulos' line of questioning his tone and the overall atmosphere suggests an intent to actually harm Trump's reputation.
And, and this isn't just a dry legal case. This involves a former president who's known for his, assertive communication style,
Right.
going up against a major news network. How could that dynamic play into the legal arguments here?
Yeah, it adds a fascinating layer of complexity. The court will have to grapple with, the norms of political discourse. where strong opinions and even inflammatory language are commonplace. They'll have to determine if Stephanopoulos' statements, even if inaccurate, were in line with the rough and tumble nature of political debate, or if they crossed a legal line.
This is quickly turning into like a fascinating legal puzzle. What stands out to you as the most important element for the court to consider?
I think for me, it all boils down to intent. Did Stephanopoulos deliberately set out to damage Trump's reputation with those statements? Or was it a genuine lapse in accuracy under pressure? I think unpacking that intent will be crucial.
It sounds like the upcoming depositions could be really pivotal in revealing that intent. What should we be paying close attention to as these depositions unfold?
I think keep your ears perked for any evidence. That reveals Stephanopoulos' state of mind during that This Week interview. Was he digging for the truth, or was there a deliberate attempt to mislead viewers? I think we'll be looking for any clues. That reveal his motivations and the level of care he took in verifying the accuracy of his statements.
This is shaping up to be a real nail-biter. I have a feeling we'll be dissecting every word of those depositions.
Absolutely. I think those depositions will likely provide a treasure trove of insights into the strategies of both sides. And I think they'll set the stage for what promises to be a long and complex legal battle.
Well, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's focus on the specifics of the alleged defamation. The Fox News article highlights a particularly tense exchange between Stephanopoulos and Rep. Nancy Mace, who was a guest on This Week. And it seems like those comments about Trump being found liable for rape came during this heated back and forth. Can you walk us through that interaction?
Yeah, it appears that the exchange happened when Stephanopoulos pressed Rep. Mace about her endorsement of Trump, bringing up the previous legal case involving E. Jean Carroll, and incorrectly stating that Trump had been found liable for rape.
And Rep. Mace defended her endorsement right. The article mentioned she even brought up her own experience as a victim of sexual assault. This conversation sounds incredibly charged.
It certainly was. Both Stephanopoulos and Rep. Mace were clearly expressing strong opinions, and the atmosphere seems to have been quite tense.
Given the sensitive nature of the topic, the fact that Stephanopoulos repeated the incorrect claim 10 times during this exchange with Rep. Mace seems particularly significant. Do you think that repetition will be a focal point for the court's assessment of intent?
I think it will undoubtedly be a point of contention. The court may view that level of repetition as evidence of recklessness or a deliberate disregard for the truth.
However, couldn't the defense argue that the repetition was simply a product of the back-and-forth nature of the conversation? Maybe Stephanopoulos was just caught up in the heat of the moment.
That's precisely the argument they'll likely make. They might claim that the repetition doesn't necessarily indicate malice, but rather a conversational misstep, amplified by the emotional intensity of the exchange.
This case is getting more and more interesting by the minute. It seems like every detail of that exchange is going to be under a microscope.
You're right. The court will likely scrutinize the transcript, analyze the tone, and consider the broader context to determine whether Stephanopoulos' statements meet the legal threshold for defamation.
What are some potential defenses that ABC and Stephanopoulos might raise? Do they have any strong legal arguments in their favor?
I think they definitely have a few cards to play. One of their strongest arguments could be that Stephanopoulos' statements were protected by the First Amendment's guarantee of freedom of the press. They could argue that, even if inaccurate, his statements were made within the context of a political debate and didn't meet the standard of actual malice.
So they could argue that even if a statement is factually wrong, it's not automatically defamatory, especially in the context of political commentary.
Exactly. They might also claim that Stephanopoulos was simply relying on publicly available information about the E. Jean Carroll case and made a genuine mistake in characterizing the jury's verdict. They could even point out that several legal experts initially made the same mistake, suggesting that it was a common misunderstanding.
That's a compelling point. If even legal professionals were confused about the difference between sexual abuse and rape in that case, it lends some weight to the argument that Stephanopoulos made an honest error.
Precisely. I think it supports the idea that his misstatement wasn't a deliberate attempt to tarnish Trump's reputation, but rather an unintentional error rooted in a misunderstanding of a complex legal issue.
Okay, so it seems like the defense strategy could revolve around emphasizing the complexities of the legal case and arguing that while inaccurate, Stephanopoulos' statements weren't made with malicious intent.
That's a likely approach. They might also emphasize the vital role of a free press in a democracy, arguing that journalists need breathing room to report on public figures and engage in robust debate without being constantly afraid of lawsuits for unintentional errors.
It's amazing how this case is shining a light on these fundamental questions about the First Amendment. the boundaries of political rhetoric, and the constant challenge of maintaining accuracy in the fast-paced world of news.
You said it. It's a real-world case study with significant implications for both the media landscape and the political sphere. And it'll be fascinating to see how it all unfolds. You know, this case is a prime example of how quickly things can escalate in today's media landscape. One misstatement amplified through social media and the 24-hour news cycle can have a ripple effect. That's really hard to contain.
Yeah, it's almost like we're all part of this giant echo chamber,
Right.
where information, accurate or not, spreads at lightning speed. And that makes the court's job even harder,
Yeah.
right? They're not just dealing with like a legal issue. They're dealing with the complexities of like our modern information ecosystem.
Exactly. The court is being asked to weigh legal principles against the realities of how information is consumed and disseminated in the digital age. It's uncharted territory in many ways.
And it makes you think about the impact this case could have on the future of reporting, especially on sensitive topics like sexual assault allegations against powerful figures. Will journalists be more hesitant to cover these stories for fear of legal repercussions?
It's a legitimate concern. I mean, this case could create a chilling effect, making news organizations more cautious, even to the point of self-censorship. When reporting on these complex and sensitive issues, it's a difficult balance between protecting individual reputations and ensuring that important stories are brought to light.
Speaking of protecting reputations, we can't ignore the power dynamics at play here. You have a former president, known for his combative approach, taking on a major news network, and one of its most recognizable anchors. I mean, that's a clash of titans. And the outcome could have significant implications for both sides.
It's a David and Goliath scenario in some ways. With each side wielding considerable power and influence, the court's decision could embolden other public figures to pursue legal action against media outlets, or it could reinforce the importance of a free press that can hold those in power accountable.
It's a high-wire act, isn't it? Finding that balance between ensuring accountability without stifling a free and independent press.
It certainly is. This case really underscores the need for clear legal precedents that can guide both journalists and public figures. As they navigate this complex terrain, we need rules of the road that are fair, consistent, and applicable in our rapidly evolving media landscape.
Well, the deposition scheduled for next week, we're about to get a much closer look at the strategies of both sides. What should we be paying attention to as those depositions unfold?
Well, the depositions are where the legal groundwork is laid. It's a chance for each side to probe the other's arguments, gather evidence, and lock in testimony under oath. It's all about building a case brick by brick.
It sounds like a legal chess match, with each move carefully calculated to gain an advantage.
Exactly. And remember, these depositions aren't just about legal arguments. They're about uncovering the intent behind the actions. Were Stephanopoulos' statements part of a deliberate smear campaign? Or were they a genuine lapse in accuracy? That's what the lawyers will be trying to establish.
I imagine the line of questioning will be intense. What kind of questions do you anticipate being asked? And what strategies might each side employ?
The lawyers for ABC News will likely focus on the impact of Stephanopoulos' statements on Trump's reputation. They'll want to know how, if at all, those statements affected his business dealings, his public image, his emotional well-being. They'll aim to paint a picture of minimal damage.
So they'll try to downplay the harm, while simultaneously arguing that Stephanopoulos had no malicious intent.
Precisely. They'll likely argue that the statements were either protected under the First Amendment or that they were an honest mistake made in the context of a fast-paced interview.
And what about Trump's deposition? What kind of questions might he face?
Well, the lawyers for ABC will likely try to establish that Trump has a history of making bold and sometimes inflammatory statements himself. They'll want to paint a picture of someone who's accustomed to the rough and tumble world of public discourse and who understands the difference between a pointed criticism and a defamatory statement.
So they'll try to portray Trump as someone who's not easily harmed by strong words.
Exactly. They might also delve into Trump's understanding of the legal definition of defamation. Did he truly believe that Stephanopoulos' statements met that legal threshold? Or is this lawsuit more about political strategy than genuine reputational damage?
It sounds like these depositions are going to be full of fireworks, each side trying to get the upper hand, to control the narrative, and ultimately to sway the court in their favor.
It's a high-stakes game, that's for sure. And the information revealed during these depositions could have a major impact on how the case progresses. They could even influence whether the case goes to trial at all.
Now, this case is fascinating on so many levels. It's a legal thriller, a political drama, and a reflection of the anxieties we all have. about navigating truth and accountability in the digital age.
You've captured it perfectly. It's a case that goes far beyond the courtroom. It touches on fundamental questions about freedom of speech, the role of the media, and the challenges of finding truth. In a world awash in information,
It's a reminder that words have consequences, and that those consequences can ripple far beyond our immediate intentions.
and it highlights the crucial role of the legal system in mediating these complex disputes and ensuring that justice is served, even in cases that are as high profile and emotionally charged as this one.
Well, as we eagerly await those depositions, I'm already feeling the tension building. I can't wait to hear what nuggets of information are revealed and how they might shift the legal landscape of this case.
It's going to be a fascinating process to observe, and I have a feeling we'll be unpacking those depositions in detail on our next deep dive.
We've been kind of, dissecting this Trump versus ABC News defamation case,
Right.
and it feels like we're standing on the edge of a legal cliffhanger here. With the trial so far away, what happens next?
Well, we have these depositions coming up, which could be a real turning point. But even after those, it's a long road to June 2025. Both sides will likely be filing motions trying to, shape the case in their favor. And there's always the chance of a settlement before it even gets to trial.
Yeah. So much could happen between now and then. It makes you wonder, what are the possible outcomes here? And what kind of impact could they have on the media landscape?
Well, let's start with the trial itself. If the case does go to trial, a jury will have to decide whether Stephanopoulos' statements meet the legal definition of defamation. And as we've discussed, that's a high bar to clear, especially for journalists.
A jury of everyday people tasked with weighing the nuances of defamation law and the First Amendment. That's a huge responsibility.
It is, and their decision could set a precedent for future cases, influencing how journalists report on sensitive topics and how public figures respond to media scrutiny.
Let's kind of play out some scenarios here. What happens if the jury sides with Trump?
Well, a ruling in favor of Trump could embolden other public figures to take legal action against media outlets, potentially leading to more defamation lawsuits. And a chilling effect on investigative journalism. News organizations might become more hesitant to report on controversial stories, especially those involving powerful individuals, for fear of these costly legal battles.
So a win for Trump could have like a ripple effect, making the media landscape even more cautious and potentially limiting the information that reaches the public.
That's a very real possibility. On the other hand, if the jury sides with ABC News, it could reinforce the importance of a free and independent press. It would be a victory for journalists who are seeking to hold those in power accountable, even if their reporting sometimes contains errors.
It's almost as if this case is a referendum on the balance of power between public figures and the media. Whoever wins the outcome will likely shape that dynamic for years to come.
Yeah, you've hit on a key point. This case isn't just about Trump and Stephanopoulos. It's about the broader relationship between those who wield power and those who report on them. It's about the limits of acceptable discourse and the role of the courts in safeguarding both individual reputations and the principles of a free press.
This whole discussion has made me realize just how much is at stake here. It's not just about one legal case. It's about the future of journalism, the health of our democracy, and our ability to engage in informed and open debate on these critical issues.
I completely agree. This case forces us to confront some uncomfortable questions about our own biases or consumption of information, and the responsibility we all have to be critical thinkers in a world where truth is often elusive.
It's a stark reminder that we can't just passively consume information. We have to be active participants, questioning what we hear, seeking out diverse perspectives, and engaging in respectful dialogue, even when we disagree.
Well said. I think this case is a call to action for all of us. It's a reminder that the principles of a free press and a fair legal system are not self-sustaining. They require our constant vigilance, our willingness to engage in thoughtful debate, and our commitment to holding both the powerful and ourselves accountable for the information we share and consume.
This has been an incredibly insightful conversation. Expert speaker, thank you for helping us navigate the complexities of this case and for shedding light on its broader implications for our society.
It's been my pleasure, host speaker. I'm always eager to explore these multifaceted issues and to help people understand the often hidden machinery of our legal system and its impact on our everyday lives.
And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive is giving you a new perspective on this case and the larger issues it raises. As this legal saga continues to unfold, we'll be here to provide analysis, context, and hopefully a bit of clarity in a world that often feels anything but clear. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep diving deep. That's our wrap on our deep dive. Thanks for joining us.